Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for coming. We'll get started in a few minutes. Feel free to drop in the chat your name, where you're from, what you do, all that good stuff.
Yay! So excited to use this platform, Alyssa.
Me too. Excited to meet everybody too.
Oh, yay, Gail! That's amazing. I'm
Uh-huh.
Johanna, and I've worked with your daughter for a while. I love her. That's so fun.
Yeah, Elizabeth couldn't be here, unfortunately. So my good friend Joanna is joining, and it's going to be a great conversation still. So
Yes. And definitely, again, putting in the chat what type of business you have, any questions you came into the webinar with is just going to help us know how to really tailor that to who's here. So, oh my gosh, look, I have a Hagarty. I love that. My name's spelled different, but I'm also a Hagarty, Kevin. From Morganton, graphic designer and web developer, currently working for a retreat center. Oh, that's amazing. That's so awesome.
Both.
I love that. Chords, what a beautiful name, too. That's really helpful. I'm in the executive coaching realm, too. So that means we can make sure we have those combos. Because Elizabeth is a designer, right? Graphic designer as well.
Elizabeth is a marketing expert.
Ah, perfect. So we would have had a very, yeah. Awesome. And like I said, any burning questions helps us know what you came in here, making sure we would answer for you, too.
For anybody who's just joining, oh, hi, Erin. Feel free to drop a little intro in the chat.
I love it. The middle of the mitten in Michigan, Erin. I love that. It is still snowing. It's kind of chilly here today.
Oh my gosh.
Business consulting, super helpful. Lacey. Website, SEO, Florida. I bet it's much warmer. We probably have heat and snow on this webinar today.
Ooh,
look.
Writing. That's cool.
Yeah. Karun, what a beautiful name. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. Well, Alyssa, it is 1:02. Like I said, I usually like to reward those who show up on time.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same. So we are recording it, so there'll be a replay for anyone who trickles in a little bit later. But thank you all for coming. We're really excited for this conversation. I'm Alyssa Phillips. I own Amped Designs based in Asheville, North Carolina, helping businesses transform their brands through branding and web design that, as I like to say, blends strategy with style. Elizabeth couldn't be here, unfortunately, because she just had a baby, which is very exciting and wonderful. We're really, really happy for her. But I have my colleague, Johanna, here, who is a business coach, who's also very well versed in this topic. And I'll let you introduce yourself, Johanna.
Sure. Hi, I am Johanna Patrice Hagarty. I primarily call myself an economic development specialist because I wear so many hats, but I really believe that creative entrepreneurship can heal, connect, and galvanize. And so I've done that through building several different companies, 2 six-figure ones. So that's been exciting. I've helped raise millions of dollars for artists and creatives and brought in lots of sales. So I do the coaching, I do consulting and sort of all of that realm. And, Alyssa and I have worked together and we talk a lot about this topic. So I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so before we dive in, I just want to mention a little bit about kind of how this webinar came to be. So Elizabeth, who in the chat, she actually was kind enough to let me log into her account to do the webinar. So my name is coming up as Elizabeth, but that's me. But we met at a virtual Squarespace Circle meetup event, and we were in a breakout room together and kind of got to talking about how we both noticed a lot of creative coaches and courses really pushing for these very desirable high level results, things like charging 10K plus, making 6 figures, working 4-day work weeks, which is all definitely attainable. Like, I don't want anything in this webinar to get confused and,
So important.
and interpret it as like you shouldn't aim for that, because you absolutely should. And we can get there. But what we were noticing was that there wasn't a lot of conversation about the long journey that it actually takes to get there. Um, and it was kind of getting perceived as if it was like a magic set of steps and there's this secret formula and you take, sign up for this program and you'll be living this luxury lifestyle. So we decided to do a webinar to kind of share the more realistic insights and experiences that the majority of designers are experiencing when it comes to raising prices and growing your business. So definitely, a lot of fun parts, and some of it can be easy, but there's a lot of hard work and patience involved that we didn't feel like was being talked about much. So that's why we're here. And I see Erin can relate.
Long journey for sure. And it'll be exciting to hear some people's experience. I see some people are wanting to transition to be full-time in their own business. Some people have already there. So again, you're all in different journeys. We're not here to say you should charge this much or not. We're here to say, here are some of the factors that can help you decide how to charge what you want to charge.
Yeah. So my personal experience with this, I probably about maybe a year and a half ago, I felt like I was kind of hitting a lot of my goals and sort of looking for what my next step was. And personally, I was getting really sucked in by a lot of this marketing that's out there and kind of feeling like I was doing something wrong because I had years of experience, I have an education in design. I know I have good work, I know I have a good process. My clients are really happy, but I wasn't really able to just like magically double or triple my prices. And actually, at the time, went to Johanna to help me figure out what I was doing wrong. And through working with her, sort of realized that while, of course, there are always things that I can work on and improve, like ultimately, I wasn't really doing anything wrong. And the pace that I was moving at was really quite normal. And so we want to kind of share our experiences, sort of like normalize where a lot of designers are at, share some strategies that have worked for us in hopes that they might also help work for you too. But also just want to acknowledge that there is definitely no one size fits all solution. So I would say, what works for me may not resonate with you, and that is totally fine. Every business is different. Everyone has different goals. So we would love to hear your thoughts and questions too, and have some conversation around what's worked for other people as well. So anytime, feel free to drop anything in the chat that you have thoughts about. So I guess to dive right in, we can talk about kind of how we started freelancing and why. So I've been talking a lot. Do you want to go first, Johanna?
Sure. Man, what a hard/weird question for me, because my career has been really unique. I started in the mental health world doing one-on-one coaching and consulting around mental health with youth and their families, and loved what I was doing. I was feeling really good, but anybody who's ever worked in healthcare or mental health, the systems are really kind of challenging and broken. And I myself was finding myself burning out and just not being able to sustain the workload that was necessary for the clients, for the companies, to appease them. And so in my part-time, I would go work festivals and go just like take little volunteer jobs and things that like just felt fun and enjoyable for me. And I had so many colleagues who were artists and creatives, and they'd be like, hey, wait, you know how to do publicity and get this in, a magazine, or, hey, wait, can you help us figure out how to have this, launch of an event or something? There were just all of these questions. People just started coming to me, and I was like, okay. So that sort of put me in this place where I didn't realize I was becoming a strategist because I was working on tiny little projects. But over the course of the last 15 years, that's really been developing. I'd say about 5 years into that, I was like, okay, I'm working part-time for a company, helping do publicity and things. I probably am not loving my mental health job, and people are asking to hire me outside of this company. So like all of those things on the table were like, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to work for myself. It kind of just like rolled into that. And so I've actually done this journey several times where, again, I've started 2 businesses. The first one failed. It was an event production company, rained out event, but it was right before the pandemic anyway. So again, things all work out how they should, right? So for me, it was actually just a very interesting long lesson in people asking for skill sets that I had, growing those skill sets. A lot of times someone would say, "Hey, can you do this?" I'd be like, "Absolutely." And I'd figure it out. But that was a part of the process, right? When I first started doing that, I was volunteering most of those gigs. Then I was getting paid. I mean, I remember the first check I got, right? And it was maybe $200 to $500, right? And I was like, "Oh my God, I have made it. It's addressed to my business." And now most of my consulting contracts don't start for less than $5,000 to $10,000. So over 15 years, that has been skill sets I've grown and created. But for me, and for most of us, honestly, it's usually a pretty windy and unique journey for all of us. So I am happy to answer other questions or thoughts. I don't know what's popped up in the chat around it, but
Yeah, awesome. For me, I was working in design studios in New York City, and my boyfriend and I kind of suddenly decided to move to Asheville. I was pretty spontaneous, honestly. And in the little bit of research that I did before we moved, I sort of discovered that there didn't seem to be a lot of in-house positions available in Asheville. And so I decided I would try working for myself and see how it went. Honestly, didn't really plan it very much. And sort of just went with the flow of things, but I ended up really loving it. It ended up being a very good fit for just like how my brain works and how I think, and I really kind of embraced the admin side of things. So yeah, I started working for myself almost 6 years ago, and then I officially formed my business, Amped Designs, 5 years ago.
so
And
exciting. It's been amazing to watch it, honestly, Alyssa.
that's so kind of you. You've been so much help.
Oh.
So I was wondering, Joanna, if you could maybe share a bit about how you came up with your pricing when you first started. How did you come up with your numbers?
Yeah, what a great question. And again, I do consulting. And so, especially in development, marketing, startup business world. So, this is different for everybody. In the startup business world, there's sort of two different realms of business, right? You either have money or startup capital, or you don't. And a lot of us bootstrap it, right? So when I started figuring out who I wanted to work with, I often wanted to work with the people who had no money. And so, quite frankly, I would only charge what they could afford, right? And some of them would be like, "Hey, I don't have any money." I'd be like, "That's fine. I'll do the project," because I was excited. I wanted to test it out. Then I started realizing as my skills increased, I would need a base pay, right? I need a base level of, because I now have skill sets. And then I typically would do that based off of an hourly rate. And to estimate that, right? Because again, with projects like this, there's all these extra factors that come in, but it just helped put a number. And so at that point, I started realizing I was having a hard time getting the rates I needed with the clients I really loved working with. So I had to get really creative and pivot. And that's why, again, I stepped into economics. I work with agencies who can afford me at the rates I need so I can work with the entrepreneurs I want, right? Because those entrepreneurs don't have the funding. So that part of the world was really difficult for me to figure out for a long time. And so that's where in this bigger consulting realm, it made sense to work with larger clients, bigger contracts, working for government agencies, things like that. And when that would happen, I would start to collect data from them. I would start to ask them, "What's your budget? How much time do you have that you need me to work on this project, right? What are the perks I get from this?" And I would custom create proposals for each project specifically, because I could conglomerate all of the different parts of pricing. I could think about what's the base pay that I would need to, make this work. What's this person valuing this work at? And so that for me has become how I've done it. But also it's really important for me to realize that over time, those increased with my skill sets too. So the first couple consulting contracts I put out, again, $500, $1,000. Now we have a whole different level of moving that forward. So for me, it's still always a work in progress. The way I price actually is always shifting because of all of the clientele I work with. So
I love that you also mentioned starting with volunteer work. So I think a lot of people kind of knock doing free work. And I
Yeah.
definitely think that like there can be a point where you're doing too much free work.
I am a
But
huge fan of saying you have to shift that at some point. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong. I'm an advocate of everyone making hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, whatever they want, right? But again, you have to do that ethically.
yeah,
You can't ruin the industry by charging $50,000 if you don't have the skill set for that yet, you
yeah.
know?
And also that's like such a great way to get into the game, for lack of a better phrase. Like I did that too when I started, because when we moved here, I didn't know anybody. We had no connections in Asheville. And so that was like honestly really helpful for me to just make some connections, get some work in my portfolio. Yeah. And I see there's some good questions in the chat
I
too.
know.
So
I'm wondering if we shouldn't kind of cherry pick, or if we can't just make sure at the end and go through all of the specific questions, because there
yeah,
are some really good questions I'm already seeing. So keep dropping them. I'll say let's try to make sure we have a plenty of time at the end.
mhm.
Does that feel best? And if
Yeah,
that feels good for y'all, let us know.
I'm gonna write them all down over here.
I love
Um,
you. This is the organized woman. I love that about her.
um, I was gonna mention when I first started and like beginning pricing, for me, it was a lot of just looking at what other designers that were also in Asheville were charging for similar services, as well as general industry standards, and
Yeah.
as well as my own experience. So I don't think there's really like a cut and dry, like you should be charging this. It's really like so many factors that come into play, like where you live, the cost of living, like
Yeah.
how much
And
experience you have, not only in the field, but like in your business and
yeah.
with your target audience and everything. Um, and I, when I started, my pricing is probably very was probably very low
Mhm.
for, I think a lot of people
It
would have been like,
was.
"Why are you charging so low?" Yeah, I was probably at like 1,000 or 1,200 for a logo and branding package, or for a 5 to 10 page website, and so now I'm like, "Gosh, that seems so low," but realistically, at the time, I had never done this before. I knew I was a good designer, but I'd never worked one-on-one with clients
Yeah.
that much, and I still had a lot to learn about, like, bringing the client through that process. So, my experience level at that time and the fact that I was still kind of figuring it out as I was going, like you said, that made that price very appropriate, and it did scare me to charge that much because I had never charged that much before for anything else. So similar to volunteer work, like that really helped me get my foot in the door and gain a bit of a reputation, get some work on my portfolio, and
Yes, yes,
grow from
and work
there.
out your processes too, right? Because like you
Yes.
said, being a graphic designer, even if you're skilled, like Alyssa went to an amazing college for that. She's got that part down. What is being a business owner? Like that's a
Yeah.
whole nother ball game. So we have to consider it's not just the skill set that you have that you're selling, it's also the organization and your business systems too. That really does matter.
Yeah.
One of the thoughts I
Um,
did want to bring up too, and we may be sort of jumping from our sort of script a little, but like I really want to address this conversation around like value proposition, right? These people who sell ads and say, just charge $10,000. We don't even know what your products or services are, right? All right, like so get really clear, what exactly am I selling and who actually needs this? And is it any different than other people's? Right? If it's standard branding and web design, which is an amazing service, you have to figure out what makes you unique so you can charge more. What's special about you? That takes time. You don't, oftentimes we can say, I think this will be my value proposition, but until you're running it through, Alyssa is so thorough. That's an amazing value proposition she provides that allows her to start charging more because people know they're going to get so much for the price that they're charging with her. So I just wanted to make sure that that was important to realize, like, what product are we selling, right? Is it one logo? Then maybe it shouldn't be $20,000, like, unless you're
mhm.
spending 6 months or so much time and process on that work.
Yeah, I see some really nice conversation around volunteer work too.
Yes. Yeah.
That
Let's see.
I'm
We can
loving.
read some out loud too.
Yeah,
Feel free.
Erin mentioned that she started out with some volunteer work and saw some great reasons, such as allowing her to kind of vet clients, seeing if she wanted to continue working with them, providing the client with quality and value, and then use that to charge appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, like as a starting point. And then, yeah, Eric mentioned too, in regards to getting some good portfolio pieces. And then Kristen added about,
Yes.
yeah,
Or testimonials, right? So again,
yeah,
depending on what your product or services you're selling, if you're trying to sell a $20,000 product and you have no testimonials, like who's going to want to trust that nowadays, right? So if you need to give it away for free or really cheap to go get those testimonials, that's another great one. So I love that point,
mhm.
Eric.
Yeah. And I also really relate to Kristen's comment about about undervaluing. And
Yeah.
I do think like that is also like another conversation.
Yeah.
And there is, like you said, Joanna, like there's a point where you have to realize like now you got to charge for this, or
Yeah.
there's only so much you can give away for free.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, it seems like it's nice to see that like everyone is kind of in consensus about the value of like doing that to get yourself off the ground.
Yeah. And again, part of what happens, and I think again, part of why you and Elizabeth were really motivated to do this is because there is marketing that I even call propaganda, right? And it's when they throw things out and they say, I'll solve your problem. I have this one shot answer. You know what? A lot of times what they're selling you is one tactic, one tiny process of how to build business, and they're overcharging because you're not getting a whole comprehensive picture. And while you might find an amazing coach who can put you in their system and teach you their processes, and that works for you, great. But there are so many people that doesn't work for because everybody is so different and unique. So part of this process is just having these conversations. Like, look how many people were like, shoot, I undercharged. Hey, I went for free. And so the conversations you're hearing digitally isn't the real truth. That's really important for
Yeah.
me to say. That was part of what Alyssa came to me. She's like, why is everyone saying this? I was like, because you're getting stuck in propaganda marketing loops because they want to sell to you. They want to trigger your brain thinking you're not enough, and you are enough. You absolutely are. So,
Mhm.
but I
I get
really
that.
think, yeah, I think Kristen, to your point, and Alyssa, like starting to again do those industry researches and start using an hourly rate if you can't figure anything else out. Like anytime, almost every industry that is here should not charge less than $50 an hour for your time. And if that, again, there's ebbs and flows, you have extra emails, but you need to get a bulk of that. And that can be a good starting place. And then there's also this idea of 10,000 hours makes you an expert. If you have been working for years on this skill and this thing, trust that you're an expert at this point and start bumping it up. And if you're afraid of raising your prices, there are lots of tactics. There are so many ways we can talk about that. And so I think that was another point on our list about how do you raise your prices and things like that, right, Alyssa? Or I don't know, where are we in our list? What should we talk about?
And I am making a note of all the questions that are coming up so we can answer them at the
They're
end.
so helpful.
So the topic is failing up to 5 figures. So what would you say are some mistakes that you made that were kind of key to your business growth?
Ooh, kind of like what you and was it Kristen had said, undercharging at times, actually for a really long time. It's part of what caused my first business to fail. And undervaluing myself in that. I don't know how many of you are working for yourself and only with yourself, or how many of you have employees or support systems. I undervalued myself and overvalued my team. So even though I was making okay money, I paid too much of that money out to my team because I wanted everybody to feel good. But in a startup, I probably should have taken more of that work on myself or seen if I couldn't have had some volunteers or things like that, right? So that's definitely one of the biggest things that I really struggled with.
Um, yeah, I think I can relate to that undercharging as well. Um, but so personally, I've had a lot of bad sales calls. That is, I'm just an introvert, and that's something that I am still not 100% comfortable with, but have definitely improved a lot over 6 years. Um, One specific example, I'm trying to get specific in terms of mistakes. um, Pretty early on, right after we moved here, I had one client who hired me for luxury business card design. She had like 15 employees that needed business cards. And I had previously worked at a luxury print design studio. So I really knew how to design for print. I knew like the capabilities, and I had paper samples, I had print examples. And however, after we had the design figured out and we knew what we wanted, I used a local printer, assuming that they could match the quality of other samples that I had. And it was so far from luxury. It was so bad that I didn't even show the client what it looked like. I just told her that it wasn't good enough. And the client, like, thank God, was incredibly understanding. And she was really disappointed, but really, really kind about it, which was a relief, especially being that new to freelancing. And I had to kind of like scramble to help her find another solution. And it never ended up being like what I intended it to be. So through that, I learned not to assume anything of third parties, basically.
Yeah.
Always ask for samples and test
Yeah.
groups, do a lot of research, and not to promise anything if I didn't know for sure that I could deliver it, especially if I was relying on somebody else for the result. So that was
I also
my
want to say
early
Nelson
start.
has a great point that kind of triggered a thought. He said that I found it helpful to let a client know what you normally charge, even if you're doing it for free or at a discount. That was something I failed at, right? I did not explain to people for years that, hey, this is a service that sometimes people charge hundreds of dollars for, but I'm doing it for free to learn, or practice invoicing, even if it's a 0% discount, which has been mentioned in the chat too. Like, that practice actually is what took me longer to get to those paid clients, because I would have to go back and psychologically re-educate that person on the value of what I was offering them. So I think it is really important, as Nelson mentions in this text there, that like we have to really be willing to say, yeah, I'm happy to do that, but next time or in the future, you can let people know it'll cost da da da, right? That's such a valuable thing that took a long time for me.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some things that helped you raise your prices?
Well, it's interesting. I just read this comment Eric wrote, how creatives go after medium and larger size businesses to make more. That's what I did. Is I started working with larger brands. I think I'm always a fan of kind of finding what I call the low hanging fruit. So is there a medium or larger size business that you have a tire connection to, or that someone you know has a tire connection to? It's always going to be much easier than a cold outreach. Also a big fan of going to like networking events where those things exist, right? If you're going to maybe a happy hour at a creative organization versus like the chamber events in your local facility, they're going to be different types of businesses. So Eric, to your point, what I ended up doing was kind of pivoting my networking and going and networking with much higher, businesses, higher as in higher revenue generating businesses, right? Because I think we're all amazing and necessary. But people who had more money and then started pitching the same services. And because I'd had all the practice for volunteer or free, or I'd made these mistakes, I could charge more. I could feel confident about that. And then that reputation starts growing, right? Just like that first client who pays you $20, $50, whatever it is, you need that first client who will pay you that 10,000 too. So what a great point, Eric. And for me, that's exactly what I did. I went and found where those people are. A lot of times, in marketing and social media, they always just talk about posting and putting these things out there, but you need to go and find them. Like what makes anybody interested in wanting to go seek you out? Now, sometimes, yeah, designers, like people are ready for designers and they might search. That's not a percentage of everyone all the time. Like Alyssa has clients who are on her social media that maybe 2 years later might end up hiring her, or right. So it's like, you're in it for the long haul. You're building a network, and you don't build a network by walking into a party and be like, hey, I'm really cool. Come hang out with me. You go talk to people. You like engage with them. You're curious about them too. So
Yeah, definitely a long-term game.
yeah.
And what you were saying about like shifting the audience, I also experienced that kind of when I was between, so when I started, my audience was primarily small businesses and entrepreneurs that were also just starting their businesses. And what I was charging was realistically pretty much all they could afford.
Yeah.
And like rightfully so. And I feel like any of us can relate to having a small budget for marketing services as well. And as I was trying to raise them, I was working with a coach at the time who sort of like made it click that if I wanted to keep raising my prices, like this was not the right target audience anymore. And so I had to shift to growing businesses or startups that had funding as opposed to the more like grassroots businesses that I had been working with. And it was like personally for me, it was a struggle because I really loved my current clients and it was really rewarding to help people who were in that startup phase. And they were always so grateful because whatever I gave them was going to be so much better and more than they'd ever had before. So it was kind of like a bittersweet. But just being realistic, if I wanted to make more money, something had to change. And there was no way I was going to be able to do more projects in a shorter timelines. So it had to go the other way.
And in the scaling of your business too, I want to say for me, that's part of why I work with the higher rates. So I can also then work with a couple clients myself. I personally am a social entrepreneurship business. So like as I make money, part of my money goes back into my own pot so I can donate scholarships out or things like that for people. But I build that into my business because that target demographic is important to me. But like Alyssa said, we still have to pay our bills. We still have to eat. We still have to whatever. And yeah, with Erin, honestly, too, if you are a really authentic and genuine business who cares about this, people are here for it. They love that. People are more likely to want to give. If you say 5% of this goes into a fund for under-resourced communities, why wouldn't you want to, support that? Or, so there are ways to grow that too. And again, we have to do that at a point when we have. So right at the moment, this second business is like just at 2 years old. I can't have my give back pot yet, right? But I will, like I'll get there. And I know that's what I'm working towards. But I have to stabilize myself and this business income first.
Yeah. I also just want to add that I did not mean to imply in any way that my current clients are not as wonderful at reward.
No, you didn't. No, I think there is this hunger for people who have to bootstrap it, and we fully get that. And I bet most of you
can
love
relate.
that too. Right. We know that hunger and that fire. And again, if you want to work with those people, sometimes it just takes being more creative and strategic. Because finding grant funding sometimes, even for actual small businesses, exists. If you say, hey, I want to do a program for this population, or I want to give away 4 websites, things like that, that exists out there too. So sometimes looking at the products and services you're selling can be helpful. Sometimes looking over at the different funding sources, right? A lot of times small businesses don't think about the fact that grants can be an option or other things like that too, so.
Yeah. And see Aaron's comment.
I know. What is it? 10,000% bootstrapping. Yeah, I so get that. You learn so much that way.
Yeah. And I'm going to add that question about.
Yeah. Of course. We'll have it. I've got some great resources for that too, for sure.
So true. Okay. And I guess in terms of raising prices in general, I'll just share for me personally, I sort of every few months, after booking like a few projects at a certain price point, every few months I would just raise them a couple $100. So it was very gradual for me. There were times where I did make a big jump, like $1,000, but I found it easier to maintain steady inquiries when it was not such a huge jump, because a lot of my marketing is also on Instagram and to subscribers that already know me from what I've been doing. So making a significant change wasn't what I personally wanted to do. But the other thing I wanted to add was that as I kind of hit these different price milestones, I also was constantly looking at my process and how I could improve it to match the new price point.
Yeah.
And I am not necessarily in terms of deliverables, but how can the client experience feel more valuable? Because what a client paying $1,000 expects is different from a client paying $10,000 realistically.
Mhm.
Um, and, I've always provided good customer service, but just, getting more experience, more projects under my belt, like learning how to lead the projects better, I've been able to just add little touches and little things that don't require like a huge amount of more effort on my part, but just help the client feel like they're getting more for their money, basically. Um, and yeah, after the webinar, the email that goes out is going to have some freebies from Johanna and myself, and one of them is a list of things that you can just inject into your process, basically, that make it feel higher level, and that essentially like contributes to being able to raise the price. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, people buy for very specific reasons. And, my course like unpacks this, but one of the reasons is they have a need. And one of the reasons is they have an emotional attachment to this thing. So if you can fulfill the need and satisfy that emotion, then charging more is actually a lot easier.
Yeah. Sorry, just keep making sure I've got all the questions.
Yeah, no, Erin had a great point too. I love it. I don't know if any of you have heard that's it when you like tell them the price. I think that's so valuable. As a clear marker you need to immediately
Yeah.
raise, and or to get some questions, right? Like when people ask you a question like that, you can respond back with a question. What would you pay
Mhm.
for something like this? Whether you charge them more that or not, then that gives you that data, because quite frankly, what the big corporations do who have millions of dollars with marketing, sales, pricing, they test their markets. They will even do A/B testing ads where it's like one's this price, one's that price. They will absolutely play around with all of this in the same way we're talking about. And again, these are the conversations that I think aren't had publicly. It's like, just charge a price, you're worth it. It's like, no, that's not what corporations do, who have been the ones taking over all the business. So if we want to take some of that, as I hope we do, we need to sort of understand how psychologically people walk into those processes.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that idea of asking them, well, what would you pay for this? It's
Yeah.
like, even if you've already like quoted it, then you have the market research.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's it. It's just really about collecting data and information for you, and a lot of times, again, we get to that sale, we say the number, we've already decided how they're going to feel about it. And so if you can remove your emotion to that, give them the information, and then see how they respond back. Some people are like, yeah, let's sign the contract today. I am literally in the middle of a discussion back and forth with a client who doesn't have the funding, is a lower start business, and I'm having to educate her on the fact that I'm going even below my low rate to support her because I want to support her, right? But I'm choosing to do that. I
Mhm.
could also be like, hey, I don't want to have this conversation. Good luck, right? But I want to help educate certain populations. This is where my give back is. I'm taking my time instead of money right now.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. We have so many good questions, and I'm kind of skipping ahead a
Yeah.
little bit.
We
I
could
guess,
also maybe pivot over to those soon just to make sure we get them answered and come
that's what
back
I'm
to any
thinking.
questions we have. Is that what you're thinking?
That's what I'm thinking. I think
Let's do it.
one other thing that I think would be worth mentioning first, though, is maybe talking a little bit about like what does success mean? Um, I feel like all of this marketing that prompted us to do this webinar around, that's so money focused and
Yeah.
focused on, lifestyle and other people's success that we want. I think it's worth thinking about like what does success mean to you, because it doesn't necessarily mean luxury clients for everybody. Um, and
And also the idea of saying, hey, I don't necessarily want money. If you can let me live for free for a couple there's all of these other ways that like we don't have to just look at the one currency we currently use, right? There are
Mhm.
ways to be creative with that. And I think that's so valuable.
Yeah, and it can change too. I don't think like your goals when
Right.
you start have to be the same 5 years later.
Yeah.
Like when I first started, all I wanted to do was make more money than I was spending, basically, and work with nice people.
Yeah.
And I mean, same now, but but there are more layers to it. But I do think it's worth acknowledging that high ticket clients is kind of what we're seeing a lot of marketing around right now,
Yeah.
but the level of expectation and responsibility that comes with working with those clients is not something that everybody wants, and that's okay. You can still be very profitable and successful with lower level clients. And like all this to say, like you're everyone's got their own goals, and like if that's what you want to aim for, by all means. But I think it's worth acknowledging that is not the definition of a successful designer.
Yeah. Or any business. And again, in these ways of selling something online, they're going to say high ticket, which is usually a high service, right? And there are three different business models. So there's volume, service, and luxury. And if you want to be volume, then you charge $20 for stuff and just make sure you get thousands of people interested, right? There are so many methodologies for building a business. Do not get sucked into one way. And I think it's really important to mention something Alyssa wrote in our thing was, when you start getting stuck, you need a support system. Like, go find somewhere else you can have these conversations. Go connect on Facebook groups. Go find a coach. Go find a mentor. Like, that is such an important part of this process, because if you're trying to figure all that out in your own head and don't have the research or the knowledge to know where to get that from, you are going to often undercharge or have more difficulty in sales convos or these things, because you aren't allowing yourself to be flexible and grow with the business too, right? And growing means educating.
True. Yeah. Okay. So I think we could answer some of these great
Yeah.
questions. Let's see here. We have okay. I'm sorry, I didn't write down who asked the questions. I just copy pasted over the questions. But one is would love a kick in the pants around marketing and hooking up with new clients and referral sources. I've never had to do marketing, but COVID took a hit on my business. Yeah, relatable.
Right. That was
So,
Kristen. Thanks, Kristen.
oh yes. Well, I think so. I can relate to that because a lot of my marketing relied on in-person networking and still does, honestly. So during COVID, that like dropped completely. So I started leaning into my social media and newsletter and blogging and getting into a really regimented schedule for that to make sure I stuck to it. And as well as virtual networking with, and that's something I'm personally still trying to build up a little bit more to, so I'm not limited to just businesses that are also in Asheville. But I would say like you were saying, Joanna, like you have to build your network, and that doesn't necessarily mean going to events in person.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think the relationship part of anything is still the most valuable part, and you can build a relationship through consistent newsletters or consistent blogging or whatever it may be.
Yeah. And then going out again and seeking those new markets. Where are the conversations being had around your product and service, right? So if you're a graphic designer, where are people saying, hey, I need support? Where do they exist? Where are they online? Where are they? What magazines are they reading, right? So getting really clear about the plan, right? In the marketing world, there's like the conversation, they call it the spray and pray, where it's like you just post all these things, do all this stuff, and like hope people will show up, right? Or hope people will buy. You want to build a pathway and a funnel, as they often call it. And so you think about it, there's the first start is people need to become aware of your business. That awareness is the big ticket. If you can find different ways to make more people constantly aware, the rest of the process usually works itself out. So Kristen, I don't remember exactly what business you have. One of the big suggestions I have for most everybody in this room is go find like the SBA programs in your area, because the SBA programs work with business owners who need graphic design, coaching, marketing, strategy, all the things that I think I've heard talked about in this webinar. So that's amazing. Like, they have these services. I've coached for almost all of them in our area, right? And that was a good start for me. And again, when I want to work with clients who can't afford it, I send them to that agency and they can come back to me. So even just reaching out and asking people to have coffee with you. What other agencies are doing well? What other organizations can you pair with too? If you're graphic design, maybe you want to pair with an executive coach and you can sort of cross refer, right? So Kristen, I hope that answers your question. There are so many ways to market. Don't get stuck in just thinking you have to post on social media. Really get creative. What are these other methodologies you can use?
That was such a good answer.
Well, you know, marketing is my thing. Mostly,
Yeah.
again, because I came from psychology. So I didn't come from marketing from this trick people into buying. I came from this marketing, like motivate people into connecting with the right product and service. So it's it's ethical marketing versus propaganda is really how I talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. Apologies that I can't remember who
I'll help you with some of these because I'm reading the chat so we can tandem it.
There was somebody who wrote about wanting to quote a web design project.
Yeah, Kevin, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and
So it
knowing a
says
little
the
bit.
website did 4 to 5 years ago. I just don't know if people can read. So he did a website for a client 4 to 5 years ago and is in need of a website overhaul. Is that the one that needs a lead
Yep.
magnet funnel and brings the conversion signups? I know a little about the things he needs, but would ordinarily not be confident enough to charge for it, and particularly not asking the amount I'm considering. Leaning toward just taking the plunge and going for it, building the airplane on the air. I love that. Doing this while working 9 to 5. Yeah, what an absolutely great and unique and specific question that I also think works for everyone. Did you have an initial thought you want to bring up, Alyssa, on that? Or
I would say that sounds very exciting, and like I hope you do go for it. I would say that. So I think it's great that you're able to identify areas that you're still not sure about, and I don't think that should stop anybody from like pursuing anything.
Yep.
But I would also be realistic. Like if you think that it will potentially affect the project, like if you're not sure if you'll be able to figure out the answers to some things, I would be open with the client about that.
Yeah.
I would be like, I'm willing to like take this on, but just want to let you know, like, I think somebody gave me advice once that was something like I can't remember the exact wording. It was something like saying, we will figure this out together. Like I will help you learn this or something like that. But just acknowledging that you are kind of like not 100%.
And by the way, being a good expert means knowing how to say this is my skill set and this is a little out of my scope, and being really clear not to set expectations, right? He's asking for you to do the work. He's not asking for you to have the most successful sales funnel. Sometimes I'm in development and fundraising a lot, and people are like, well, can't you just get money based off how much you work? I'm like, that's actually really unethical, like in my industry. So no, I can't, but I'm willing to like take the risk with you for a smaller percentage of sales or, you know, income.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important.
And also the aspect of him wanting the web design that is also a lead magnet and funnel with conversion signups, like you can set that up, and there are things that we can do as web designers that contribute to conversions and sales, but it's not all on the website design. Like there are other steps that his business needs to take outside of website design. So just make sure that like you're upfront about that too. Because I also have people who like so I don't do SEO, but if somebody comes to me for web design and they express that they're thinking this new website design is going to convert a bunch of clients and like get them a bunch of leads, I'm like, well, having a nice web design may contribute, but there's still other marketing efforts that need to be in place in order for people to go to your website to begin with, and that's outside of me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Getting clear and educating. Honestly, this is such an important part too. A lot of what we do as consultants is educate on what we do and don't do. And this is what we've talked about with Alyssa and why she writes some of the blogs that she does. It helps her not to have the same conversations with clients over and over. She can send them to that page to get that information and understand why she has to charge what she does or why she works in the process that she does. So I know that might not help you give a specific amount, Kevin, but my guess is like start with kind of figuring out a general hourly rate for yourself, you know, be clear with them that this is going to be a bit of an experiment for both of you. And again, be willing to like learn from that, right? And I've also done this before. If it was a project I didn't understand well and I was willing to take it on, I'll be flexible. If I didn't quite get the outcome I was hoping for, even if I promised it or not, I'll maybe extend the contract. I'll add a little thing. Like, flexibility is one of my core values. So that's how I compensate for that when it's like, oh gosh, it might not be perfect, but it's because I'm figuring out how to do this for you. And then the other thing too, I'd say, Kevin, there is so many free resources out about sales funnels and using the tools too. So what you don't know, right? Go learn on the job. I think will be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you worded that better than I
did. Again, I'm the business coach in the room. Like, this is what I do.
You're good at talking on the fly. Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to find which ones seem like most relevant to the.
Yeah, I see one that says, Emily, I'm struggling to find time to do freelance work on the side. Any tips on how to successfully balance time with a design job during the day and then finding time to run your own design business on the side? I don't know. This isn't, you kind of went from full-time into fully working your business. So I don't know if you have a lot of experience in this, Alyssa.
That's really hard. I had done like a little bit of freelance work on the side, but
I'm happy to, yeah, because again, I do this a lot. I'll take either bigger contracts that almost feel like full-time jobs, right? If it's $80,000 for a year, it's going to require a lot of input. I'm a big fan of kind of batching my work weeks and batch scheduling things. So, you know, I'm not sure, Emily, if exactly what you're doing at work and in your freelance is the same, or if the thing you're doing in your job means you have to be there 9 to 5. These are questions I would probably ask if we were giving you a super specific answer. But, you know, you can either say, great, all of Saturday is freelance work. So I know I have 8 hours a week of work I can, or after work every day for 2 hours, I'll do this. Or, you know, if I'm doing stuff for my clients and stuff for the company that's the same, and I get to work in my own hours, I'll do all those things at the same time, right? It really is, again, it depends on what your skill set is, what your time limits are. Do you have kids? Like all these other things, but really trying to get clear and actually forcing in your schedule some time. Then you are clear how much time you have to contribute to that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is also just like being realistic about how much you can like physically do without burning out.
Absolutely.
And it's okay to say, to tell the client what the timeline is. Like, you don't have to accept the client or the timeline that they give you. Like, you can push back on that. And I think that was something I had to kind of learn early on too. Because I would just say, like, it's all on the client's terms, but it's like they are hiring you. It's on your terms.
Yeah. So building your contracts in that way, maybe you need longer runways because you only have 5 hours a week. That's such a great point. Yeah. Oh my God. This one from Michael. What are your thoughts on AI dipping into the prices for work pool? I love this question because I actually have been dealing in sort of the AI world recently and some of the blockchain and all these, just dabbling. It's really volatile. I wouldn't recommend like diving in. What I will say about AI for our industry, and this is really common, a lot of the actual professionals, like the higher level professionals are saying this too. It's less about them actually like taking our work and more about a tool for us to utilize, right? Like I work with AI chatbots and AI visual graphics. Like I have to constantly change it and shift it and make it actually fit what I know the client needs. So I will utilize them, but I utilize them to enhance my services. And guess what? It's a way you can charge more because if you put, you know, your stuff in there and you ask it to really SEO optimize or some of these other things that it can do, then great. Like it's done that work for you in a way that it's like pulling from all of this knowledge digitally, where our brains are constantly like, wait, what's that thing? You know, so my take is I think AI can be really valuable. I don't think it's anywhere close to the point yet where it's going to remove us from work. Like there is so much that we have to manipulate it to get the results we want at this point still.
Yeah. Admittedly, I have not really, really dug into it at all. But I agree with you that I don't think it's at a point where
it's not.
I think there's always going to be a market for people who want a personal, like relationship and someone's brain, like thinking.
Well, and again, think about it. Like that person is hiring someone because they don't want to spend the time. or
Mhm.
don't have the time. How can they go in again and train and talk? They don't even know the right words to ask these AI bots, or the right things to say. It requires a skill set to know how to use those
Mhm.
tools,
So
just like it
true.
requires a skill set to use Squarespace or all the other tools we do too. So
Yeah. Okay, there was a question. Do you have any advice about creating and maintaining timelines with clients? Sometimes it feels hard to keep clients on a schedule, and then the
I love
project
that
drags
one.
on forever.
I was like, I bet Alyssa has one for
Hashtag
this.
relate. Yeah, this has kind of been like something that's come up a lot over the years because I am a yes person and I don't like to make anybody upset. And historically, I've had struggled with like putting my foot down and being afraid that's gonna make the client mad. And I kind of am like, well, I'll just let it go and it'll be done soon. And then it just snowballs and becomes a whole thing. But so I guess there's like two parts to this. One is like being comfortable setting the boundaries and like keeping the boundaries. And I think that doing that is easier when there are other clear communications in place first.
Yeah.
So one thing that I started doing that's been really helpful is booking once the client books the project. I've started having a like 10-15 minute welcome meeting. This is like months before the project even begins because I book really far out. But as soon as they book, we have this quick meeting and I review some of these policies because it's all in the contract, but I think a lot of us can relate to the fact that a lot of clients don't read the contract. And
Or comprehend it, even if they, yeah.
I was even finding that a lot of them weren't even reading the welcome packet where I had all this stuff outlined. So I'm just verbally telling them, in a kind way. I'm not like being like a warden about it, but like in a kind way that I'm expecting them to send me feedback on proofs within 2 business days, and don't bring all these gazillion other voices into the project for feedback, and that my timeline is very important. And after it, get like a week if we get a week or so, off, then I have to reschedule the project because as they can see, I'm clearly booking far in advance.
Mhm.
And I found that verbally saying that has so far really helped because now I know that people are absorbing the information. And then also setting up a system of reminders. So I'm
Yeah.
working on setting up Dubsado to kind of automate some of this stuff for me so I don't have to manually send all these emails.
Mhm.
But if need them to give me feedback within 2 days, then I'm gonna put that in the email the first time that I send the email requesting feedback. And then the next day, if I haven't received it yet, follow up. And then the day of, follow up
Mhm.
and restate like what the repercussions are gonna be if I don't hear from them. So just being like very, very, very clear and like just never assuming that the client is going to remember or read.
Or be able to follow through, because again, they're so busy as entrepreneurs, and we get that too.
Yeah.
For me, in the psychological sense, it's about neurolinguistics, the way you say it, how you say it, when you say it. And like Alyssa said, set up tools. Even Gmail has Boomerang. I just set it up. It says if it hasn't been responded to, send it tomorrow again. Great. Like, so there are all these tools that can help automate the process. But
Mhm.
really psychologically being clear, and that's one of the things you and I've worked a lot on, is like, what are the top 3 things that if your clients do, you're going to get everything done, right? And so make sure at that intro meeting, make sure in your response emails. I've even had clients like commit and sign separate contracts, right? More like agreements about these few things. Like, you agree to behave this way, you agree to this, and here's a consequence. And a consequence can be a fee. It could be, like you said, canceling the project. It could be, we're going to have to extend it. It's not even, consequences always seem negative. It's just like, I work in this process for a reason, so you get this rate. If not, this is what will happen. If you predict that, spell that out, most people don't want that consequence.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think just like the sooner that you can make sure that they're aware of, like you said, for lack of a better word, consequences, the better. So it never seems like a surprise that's sprung on them.
yeah,
And
yeah,
at that point, if you do need to enforce something, it's not a surprise.
yeah, yeah. And I definitely want to make sure we get this question in for Cords too, about the how do we find grants.
Oh yes.
I love that question. First off, I am just the biggest fan of like Googling or whatever platform you use, Safariing, like I don't care, like typing in small business grants for this type of business, small business grants. I will also say Hello Alice is an amazing small business resource. They have grants almost every month. So you can constantly reapply. They actually populate most of the questions. So if you filled out a grant before, they'll like repopulate what you put. It's an amazing resource. You just sign up. You have to sign up to get access to it. But like I use it all the time. I've gotten me and my clients over $50,000, $60,000. And then also, again, going to your local agencies. What are the small business network support systems? Asking them. During the pandemic, our local community gave out almost $1 million in small business grants to exactly us type of businesses. But most of my colleagues weren't aware of them and missed out on those opportunities. So
You said that was Hello Atlas?
Alice, ALICE. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I know, I'm just peeking through. We got the timeline. I think we got through all of the actual questions. Are there any last, I do see Erin, she's not here anymore, but she might be able to come back. Thoughts on BNI chambers or other networking options? I'll just say really quickly, match your network, match the target market you're trying to attract, right? If you want to work with businesses that would be at the chamber, go there. If you want to work with businesses that associate with BNI, go there. A lot of the clientele I want to work with aren't at those facilities. I have to do other networking. So really it's less about what I like or don't like and more like, is it of value to you?
Yeah. And I think also it's worth noting not to discount networking with other creatives in your own industry.
Yeah.
So like for designers, things like AIGA or AAF, for marketing, like AMA organizations, and not discounting that like those people can be great referral partners or collaborators. And that kind of ties into another question that was in here about unique ways to partner with others. I would say I do feel fortunate that Asheville is very community driven and it doesn't feel competitive in our design scene. But that was something that was really helpful for me. It was just getting to like have coffee with other designers and like learn how they do things. And often that's how I got a lot of my early work, from them like referring their overflow work or bringing me in on a project.
Right.
And then as far as, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say too, the idea of you guys working together in these affiliate referrals, like I give some of my colleagues who refer me clients, I put money in their pocket. Like, yo, if you're going to give me a $5,000 referral, it does not hurt to put $100 in their pocket. And that is a really good psychological reward for those people. It doesn't have to be that. But again, if someone like introduced you to the love of your life, you would be forever grateful for them. So it's like these kinds of relationships, and doing kind of like collaborative giveaways and things on social media can be really valuable if you want to just grow your audience at times to look for new people, so that's super great. And then I did see Kevin, I want to kind of get this, and I think it ends at 2, right? So.
Yeah, I was gonna say like we could, I maybe like say goodbye and then we answer some questions for anybody else who wants to stay.
I think it was just this one more. So maybe answer, say bye, and then I'll have to leave by 2:15 at the latest.
Okay.
Did I beat the buzzer? You got it, Kevin. So he says, any tips on figuring out your target demo market? I really struggle with this. Such an important question. Honestly, my whole business course is built on learning everything in business. And we start with core values. We start with mission and vision. Then we move to target demographic. So the question really is, who are you? What are you trying to accomplish? And what matters to you? Then when you have those really core understandings, you can start in researching different demographics and industries. I look at psychographics and demographics. So that's age range. That's all these things. When you know that you want to do this type of stuff in the world, finding those type of people become easier. I do understand researching target markets is a skill set. That can be a little challenging, but you start by just knowing who you are. And then who do you want to connect with? And then we start researching those types of people. So I hope that helped, Kevin.
I 100% agree. Okay, well, that was great. I'm glad you fit that in. Yeah, thanks to everybody so much for coming. Please look out for the email with our freebies. We have a list of kind of ideas that can help up-level your client process. And then Joanna, you have a module from your course, I believe.
Yeah, it's about pricing. So it kind of breaks down some of the different pricing models because we didn't even really go into the fact that you can price in different ways too. We talked mostly about hourly rates, but this talks about wholesale versus retail versus percentage versus all these other things, and then has a worksheet that you can answer questions about maybe what pricing model might be best for you. So
That sounds great. Thanks.
yeah.
And I am planning to have Elizabeth kind of record her thoughts about this topic in the near future. And I will share her answers on my social media. I'm sure she'll share them on hers too. So stay tuned for that. Please reach out to any of us anytime. Stay in touch. You can find me on Instagram at Make Your Design Matter, and my website is ampdesigns.com. And then Joanna, do you want to
Sure,
share?
yeah. I'm arthero.biz is the website. And then on Instagram, I'm art_hero_jph. I'll throw that in here.
Yeah, thanks. And then Elizabeth is here's, hold on, I'll put it in the chat too. Good idea. And then Elizabeth is getabsolutemarketing.com. And yeah, it's been great chatting with everybody, and hope to check with you again at some point.
Yeah, and we can, if anyone has other questions, drop them down, and we can stay again for just another couple minutes. Have to go help a friend move after this.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, thanks, Eric and Emily and Jennifer and Keith. Gail, you're so sweet. Love it. I love it. Yeah. Any last minute thoughts or questions? Anything you feel like you didn't get to share, Alyssa, that you were like, oh, the burning point?
No, I was going to add, I don't know if, sorry, I keep forgetting who asked the questions. Whoever asked about the unique ways to partner with others, I was going to add like this kind of stuff, like webinars.
Absolutely.
On your blog.
Yep.
And co-posts.
You shout out your clients too, which makes them excited and makes them want to share. So, I mean, like having your clients sharing your work is so invaluable. And so really just being amped up to share that with the world makes everybody really happy too.
Yeah, I usually include a set of launch graphics when I send over final files from a project. And I'm like, a tag is always appreciated.
So smart. Yeah. Really. And again, like you really want to just figure out who's interested in what you have and then like hype them up, right? That's again, I think about marketing and growing a business so much like building relationships because it is. Yeah. So it's really like you can't just take or charge $20,000 if you have no experience or, you know, it's really, it's an ongoing process. So. Well, I'm not seeing any other thoughts or questions. I love that we still have people like hanging on, like listen to us chat. It feels so wonderful.
Yeah. Well, this was great. Thanks again. And I guess we'll say goodbye and hope to see you soon.
Yay. Have a great Wednesday, everybody.